Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Brandley.
And I'm Alicia Coakley. Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On today's episode, we're going to learn how one detective's mission to bridge the gap created by trauma helped him to remember who God created him to be in order to change the world. Welcome to Latter-day Lights. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Latter-day Lights. We're so excited you're here with us, and we're really excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Glen Williams. Glen, how are you doing today?
Very good, Scott and Alicia. Nice to be here.
Thanks so much. I heard the little slip. You almost called me Ashley, and I think I've said it in one of my other shows. I'm very forgiving when that happens. My husband called me Ashley, and I ended up marrying him. So Glen, thank you so much for being here today and for taking time out to share your story and your incredible journey that you've been on for our guest. So Glen's one of my people that I bombarded, because that's what I like to do sometimes, is when I feel this spiritual connection to someone that I meet, I'm like, hey, how would you like to come and be on a podcast? But we met at a book conference at the Calliope book conference, pitch conference. And it was so cool because Glen was actually one of the author panel members. And when he spoke about his book, Bridging the Gap, and just the journey that he kind of went on with that, I felt such a connection to him. And I just felt the spirit just kind of like drill into me, like, go talk to him afterwards. Go talk to him afterwards. So I don't know. I haven't had a chance to read his book yet. I have it literally right next to me. I haven't had a chance to read it all yet. So I don't know what this episode's going to hold, but I'm just going to put it out there. It's going to be great. It's going to be a really great episode. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Glen, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I grew up in a small farm town in eastern Colorado, and after some trials and choices that I made that didn't work very well, I ended up in Utah. Funny thing. And from there, it's been a whole journey from there. I became a police officer and a detective later on, and was an officer and detective for 26 years. And
okay,
just yeah. So that's kind of then the story. The rest of the story is from that experience.
Awesome. Do you have any kids?
Yes, I have. I'm the Brady Bunch. I have 6 total.
Really?
Okay.
I have 3 and my wife has 3. And we cover every time zone in the country except Hawaii and Alaska.
Oh, wow.
And we have, just great kids. Let me see. And then I've got 5 grandkids.
Aw, nice.
They're the best, by the way.
Yeah. I ask every guest, I have to know, do you have a special grandpa name?
No, I don't think I do, really.
Really? You're just grandpa?
Yeah, I'm just grandpa.
Okay.
Actually, it's probably come full circle, Alicia. Now, like, grandpa is probably unique.
It probably is. You're probably
everybody
right.
else has a grandpa name.
That's true. The other one does. So, but he lives. They see him all the time too.
Oh, gotcha.
I think that helps too. Anyway, yeah. If you want a little more detail, I'll get into some detail and we'll go from there. Like I say, I grew up on a farm, and I learned, not recently, but it kind of really opened up to me recently. A lot of the things that we learn when we're young affect the decisions we make later in life. And most guys that are anywhere within 10 or 15 years of me, and even the kids nowadays, a lot of them are learning, hey, I'm a guy. I don't need help. I got this. I can do this. And that's kind of the way I was raised. And so I went through life not asking for help. I didn't know how to ask for help. And I don't really like the word help, but we'll use it because that's what everybody understands.
Yeah.
And so is your book kind of about getting help? Is that
learning to help myself, and yes, getting help in the later parts of it, especially going through some traumatic things, you've got to do it or it'll eat you alive.
I love
Okay.
that. So it's taking the responsibility yourself, but also accepting that there are tools out there, right? And that it doesn't have to be 100% on you all the time, right?
Exactly. If you need some
Wonderful.
assistance, then you can go make a phone call or two and get it. And
Awesome. Well,
that's
why don't you start telling us your story then? So let's
Yeah.
get into it.
It'll be interesting. I hope. Um, when I was younger, I grew up in a small farm town. And again, that's where I was an athlete. My father was a coach. So, that's where we learned to suck it up, buttercup. If you had a sprained ankle, you didn't hobble because you didn't want anybody to know you had a weakness,
Oh,
especially when you were in
jeez.
competitions. And,
Mhm.
I played football, wrestled, played baseball. I did it all. And so needless to say, I'm ultra competitive, by the way. So I kind of learned that. And when I got out of school, and it's being a small town, if you didn't own land, you had pretty much leave. There were no businesses there. And we didn't own land. My dad was a teacher and a coach and a part-time minister.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I went to college. I wanted to be a veterinarian. And in that travels, hey, I did really well. My first year, I lived with my aunt and uncle, 3.9 GPA. I'm good. Second year, I moved out and I discovered girls, alcohol, and a whole bunch of other things.
Oh, dear.
I didn't learn much in school, but I learned a lot about life.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay. School of Hard Knocks.
oh yeah, and boy, some of the choice I made, I actually rodeoed for the school. My junior year, I walked on and played baseball, and there, like I say, this is not a small town anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I started drinking too much and playing too much, and that led to going to school. Then physics and organic chemistry kind of kicked my tail. I found out that's not my cup of tea,
Mhm.
Yep.
and
Mine either.
yeah, and I ended up leaving after my junior year on probation with a 1.9 GPA cumulative. So yeah, I played
Oh,
a lot.
yikes.
But what's interesting is during that year, I met some people and met somebody at a conference because I actually still did some things decently. And I ended up going to a national convention or a conference as a kind of a reward for the projects I'd done. And the funny thing is, there was a gal from Utah, and her family to this day is like my family.
Aw.
And so we met and became friends. And then I was sitting at a rodeo one day and I saw this guy sitting out on the back of his pickup truck. And we're all feeling no pain from the night before, put it that way. And he was sitting over drinking milk and reading a book. And I kind of went over and said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Oh, what are you reading?" "Oh, it's the Book of Mormon." And so
Okay.
between those two contacts, I actually ended up joining the church.
Aw.
Moved
Wow.
to Utah where I knew nobody. I knew the one family, and I actually hadn't even met them yet. Knew the one girl and talked to her, and I talked to her family a little bit on the phone, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, there were no cell phones back then. Okay. um, yeah, I moved to Utah, and I got a job. And by the way, I lived in Logan for a year, and if you know Logan, it's too dang cold.
It is
You knew it
cold.
was enough. And I worked on a farm up there. That was a fun one. Job interview. I walked out. I had some boots, corduroys, dressed decently, and the guy's out running the tractor, plowing the field. And he pulls up, stops, walks over. He says, "You ever plowed before?" And I said, "Yep." And I'd never plowed before. I'd ridden with my dad in the tractor, when I was 10 years old. But he goes, "Show me." So I got in, got the plow going, and I knew how to follow a line. But he didn't tell me there was some building foundations in the middle of the field. And the plow pops up.
Oh,
It
no.
breaks what they call a shear pin. So I'm thinking, I back it up, drop the plow, and I'm thinking, okay, bolts are always in a bucket under the seat. I looked down, I looked out, looked at what was on there, found one under the seat, fixed it, lifted it up, got it over, and I ran 3 or 4 lines, and he comes over and he says, "All right, you'll do." I faked it like crazy.
Oh, wow.
I watched my dad do that when I was 10 years old. But that was my first job, and it was a fun job. I loved that. Then, believe it or not, I actually went on a mission, and that was kind of weird because I finally figured out all these girls that I liked. They'd asked me if I was a return missionary. I went, no.
Mhm.
I've only been a member of the church a year,
Oh,
Yeah.
all right.
if that. And it was like I couldn't get a date. I was 22, 21 years old. I couldn't get a date.
Oh.
Mhm.
So I kind of figured, okay, this has got to be a socially accepted custom here in Utah because it's nothing I ever heard of before.
Definitely a culture thing for sure.
Yeah. And so I ended up going on a mission. A member of my ward actually sponsored me because my family was not members, and I'll tell you that story in just a moment. So I went foreign. I went to Arkansas. Yeah. So that was a great experience. I learned a lot. And one time my dad actually came down to kidnap me home from the cult.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And yeah.
Like while you were on your mission, he came to Arkansas?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Did he like see you and like try to pull you in a white van, or like was he just kind of watching you, or like how did that
No, he
play
actually
out?
came and we went out to dinner a couple of times, and he saw me, but he said, later, he didn't tell me this till a few years later, by the way. But yeah, he had some really kind of funky ideas about the church, and he came back and he was just going to say, get in the car, let's go home. But I was always with a companion, and so he couldn't do that.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
So yeah, and he wasn't going to grab me and force me. He might have thought about it, I don't know. But it didn't work that way. So anyway, I came home, and then we'll start the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey says.
Okay.
I came home and I got married, and married a really nice, neat lady. And that's where we were married for 19 years, and I had my 3 kids with her.
Okay.
And we were very active in the church at the time, and as we went through things, all of a sudden, after my third child was born, she suffered from postpartum depression, which we didn't know what depression was back in the day. And as the depression got worse, I became a police officer during this time, by the way, and police officers didn't make a lot of money, so we all had part-time jobs. In fact, I was working full time. I had 1 or 2 part-time jobs. I'd work, 3 or 4 days a week, or 4 to 6 hours extra each day, depending on what was going on. Or a weekend when I was off, I would go work. Anyway, the depression got so bad that she crawled in bed, and I basically did not see her for 9 years. She quit work, and so I took another part-time job to make up for her her income.
Oh my gosh.
And then I took another part-time job. She went part-time, then she quit, and I picked up another job. So I was working with 3 kids. I'd get up at 5:30, go to work at 6 in the morning, work at the police department. I was in detectives at that time. I'd get off at 4 or 5, and then I'd come home, make dinner for the kids, and then assign my daughters some chores because they were old enough. My son wasn't. And go to work at one of the part-time jobs, and I'd work till midnight or 1 o'clock. And then I'd come home. And every other night I stopped at the grocery store on the way home to get food for the next day, so we had something to cook. And, my kids got a lot of hamburger helper, to be honest with you. I'm not sure they've ever eaten it since. But, I did what I could, and that was tough. So after about 9 years, I was struggling, and I look back now, and I don't know how I survived at work. I really wonder if I did a good job. I did a good job for the most part, but I was nothing special at work. I was just your everyday guy, and that's what I was doing. But I realized I was exhausted. I had sleep deprivation. I mean, I was sleeping 3, 4, maybe 5 hours a night if I got it.
Mm.
And I finally
Wow.
said, enough's enough. And I filed for divorce. I told her I couldn't do it
Oh.
anymore. The sad part is when I gave her the divorce papers, she looked at me and she says, "You can't leave me." And I kind of looked at her and I said, "Why?" And she goes, "Because I have cancer."
Oh.
Now,
Wow.
that's part of being a police officer. I witnessed a lot of horrific things. I had a car trying to run me down. I went through a door while shots were being fired. The absolute worst is pulling a little kid out of a pond and not being able to save him.
Oh.
And I held all that in. I never shared it. I never showed any emotion. I didn't talk to things with my wife about it because I didn't want her to worry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the excuse I used back then. And I look back realistically, I think I didn't talk to her about it because I didn't want to relive it.
Mm.
I have to be self-accountable because I really think it was a survival instinct for me.
That makes
Anyway,
sense.
she says she has cancer. And I laughed. I said, "No, you don't. You're always using health as an excuse." And because she was always sick and always in bed. And 2 days later, she brought me paperwork and she had cancer. And that is how
Really?
bad our communication had gotten. She has cancer.
Wow.
She knows it and didn't bother to tell me. So I don't know if it's because she was afraid to tell me, or if I was just so shut down, I didn't let her tell me. I don't know.
Oh.
But again, I'm huge on self-accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to look at what did I do to create that situation. So I held on to the divorce and let her use my insurance for another year. And I'll be honest, I screwed up back then. I will never, ever do it again. But I had an affair.
Mm.
And I later discovered that that's one of the big risk-taking behaviors of PTSD is
Really? Wow.
I talked myself into so many on foot chases and fights because it was a thrill.
Mhm.
And what's a bigger thrill than putting the thing that's most important to you, your family, at risk and then getting away with it?
Right.
What's a bigger thrill? Putting the
Wow.
thing that means the most to you at risk.
Mhm.
And these are some things I've discovered in the last couple of years, some of the behaviors related to PTSD that I did never associate with it. I just thought I was an idiot, which I was. But that was a choice that I made.
Mhm.
And I, like I say, that no way will that ever happen again.
Well, and it's one of
God,
the things that I've learned through my own trauma is that our Heavenly Father has designed our brains to do certain things to protect us,
yeah,
right? And so it may not make sense why we make those choices, but it's almost like once you understand the design, once you know, oh, this is happening because of this, and this is why I feel like I want to go do that. All of a sudden, it gives you more power.
Yeah.
It may not take away the trauma that you had or even the PTSD that you're experiencing in the moment, but it definitely helps you to be a little more clear-minded. And so I can see how, definitely, like you were saying, like taking risks was one of those things of PTSD. You were thinking that you were just being an idiot, but there's a big part of you that maybe really wasn't. Like you didn't know what was happening in your brain at the time. And not to excuse your choices, but just to kind of almost give someone an understanding that you made a choice, but you didn't have all the knowledge that would have helped you to make a different choice at the time, right?
Absolutely. And plus, I have a hard time saying that I was part of God's plan, but as I look the way things worked out, it might have been because my first wife, we got everything finalized. I actually married the gal that I had the affair with. And
Wow.
she, after my first wife passed away about 2 years later, she was a great stepmom for my son, who was 11 at the time.
Really?
She was a great stepmom for him.
Oh.
And they keep in touch to this day. there's other things that happened after that. But my problem was some of the things I saw, and I'll share a couple of them. And I'll cry because I always do.
That's okay. We like to cry. I like to cry anyway. I'll cry with
for
you.
never having to it, I have a lot of making up to do, a lot of time to make it. But as I went through the police work, things happened. I told you, I was a 17-year officer when I pulled the child from the pond. 17 years. And I had been an officer for 12 years when I got divorced from my first wife. When I pulled that child from the pond, it was kind of a weird deal. I went into roll call 6 a.m. and immediately got a call about a missing child. So I went out to an apartment complex, and the first thing you do is check the house because 80% of the kids are hiding somewhere in the house. Mm-hmm. And we could not find him. And the parents called this kid Little Houdini because he got away out of everything. They even put extra locks on the door, and he still got out. Wow. And as I pulled into the apartment complex, they had a pond there and a fountain, and it was piled high with soap suds. Some teenagers had put boxes and boxes of soap suds, and the suds was like 10 feet in the air.
Oh my gosh.
And overflowing out onto the parking area. So we looked for this child. We asked him, okay, he's not in the house. Where's his favorite playground? Does he have any friends? He's 3 years old, so he's not going to be super mobile. And we looked for 40 minutes in all the places that we could find. And we gathered by the pond in the parking lot to discuss, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do next? Reorganize our plan. As we were standing there, a little breeze came up and it split the bubbles just enough that we could see the foot of a child in the pond, and we pulled him out. Did CPR till fire got there. When fire got there, they put him in. We're on the way up to primary children's, but they pronounced him dead on the way, which we were informed of. I held everything together, got the family, the parents and everything, got the other kids watched by neighbors. Did all the stuff we have to do as professionals. And they were on the way. And when we heard that, that was just crushing. It was crushing. And this is the first time in my career, 17 years, that thank God, not the first time I had a good leader, but I had a good leader that day. And he walked up to me, and here's a friend of mine from Louisiana saying, "Are you okay, brother?" In his little Southern accent a little bit. And for the first time in my life, I looked at him and I said, "No, I'm not."
Oh, man.
I mean, I was in my 40s at that point. I had done a lot of things in life, but had never, ever admitted a weakness. And for the first time, I said, "No, I am not okay."
Wow.
And he says, "Don't worry about your report." He says, "Go take care of yourself. And when you get done, then you can come worry about the rest of the stuff we know you got to do." And I said, "Thank you." I went over, found a church parking lot. I backed up against a brick wall because I didn't want anybody coming in behind me. And I bawled my eyes out for about an hour.
Oh, man.
Anyway, that was a beginning of sorts because at least I admitted. And I had somebody that actually cared enough to ask. And I think that's a big part of it is we all create these walls. And I looked at that time, that had gone on, the differences, and that's just one of, in my book, I talk about, I don't know how many, but I share a lot of experiences, and a lot of them were really rough. Mm-hmm. I let them eat me alive. Anyway, I was married, and to the second wife, I'm a slow learner, so I tried it again, and I ended up with the same result. I was married about 13 years this time, and there were a lot of things that happened. There were a lot of things I could blame on her. But again, I have to look at what did I contribute to the failure, because the last thing I wanted was to be what I call a two-time loser. That's how I looked at myself, was two-time loser. And things weren't working well at all. So we finally came to an agreement and ended that relationship. And it was kind of interesting, the way things happened. I had retired from the police department, was working for another police department at the time. I went to the transit police, and that was a whole different world. I got more fights and foot chases there than I did in the 20 years I was at the other first police department. I was only in transit for 6 years. But as we started going through things, I realized, what did I contribute to these failures? And I started really getting self-accountable. I ended up living at my cabin by myself for 3 years.
Wow.
And I drove 57 miles to work. So I would get up at 3:30 in the morning, go to work, and I would come home at, by the time I got off work at 4, I'd get home probably about 6.
Jeez.
And that is if I didn't have to work overtime, which we did quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd come home and I would make dinner and I would make myself a drink. And I was smart enough. I had started to drink a little bit, and I was smart enough, though, to hold it to 2 glasses a night because I didn't want to be drunk. But the glasses I chose were 32 ounces each.
Wow.
So I was feeling no pain. I mean, I was having nightmares, but one of those nights, there's no pain. I was numb. And I didn't want the divorce that I was going through. I didn't want to have the nightmares. I just was, I didn't know where I was at that time. I was lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually lived that way for about 9 months.
Wow.
Anyway, once I got through that, and I woke up one morning and I looked at myself and I said, "What are you doing? You're only hurting yourself. Nobody else cares. Been up here by yourself for 2.5, 3 years almost." And I started changing things. And the hardest thing to change is habits. I was in the habit of just coming home, making a drink, making dinner, sitting down, and then going to bed.
Right.
So what I started doing was I started throwing my gym bag into my car. I was 17 miles from town. And once I was home, I wasn't going to go back down to town, especially in the winter. So I started throwing my gym bag in my car, and I'd stop at the gym on the way home in town. And then I'd work out and I'd go home and I'd shower up and go to bed. And it was, I started changing those habits. Then I actually went through some personal enhancement type training, and I kind of started opening up a little bit and confronting the things that I was doing in my life that were not working.
Mm-hmm.
And I got back in touch with nature. Nature's such a healer. I would go for hikes. I lived up in the aspens and the pines. So I'd go for hikes up through the trees. I had moose in my driveway, the deer all around me. And I started really paying attention to things like that and really becoming appreciative of nature and the things that were created. Oh my gosh. In the winter, I actually bought snowshoes and I started doing the same things in the winter. And of course I had to have my white snow camo so nobody could see me through the trees. But I got back in touch with me, and I started healing. And there are so many things that have happened that I know I'm not alone, and I am not creating these things. Like, I was talking to a therapist, and once I started feeling better and getting where I was actually, in my opinion, presentable in public, basically, I was becoming who I am again. Got back in touch with the open, honest me. I started talking to a therapist, and I said, I shared a lot of things with her. That was the first step. And by the way, you've got to talk to somebody or this stuff will eat you alive.
Yeah.
Whatever, if you've got a traumatic experience, then get it out there. So I suddenly came through with the therapist I've been working with, and I talked to her and I said, I really would like to help others because I'm not the only one in this boat.
Mm-hmm.
I know there are officers out there. If you've been on more than 4 or 5 years, you've got some sort of PTSD. You've seen too much stuff not to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we talked about it, and we talked about teaching it together. And I was sitting up in my cabin one morning. I woke up, I had a day off, and I think I woke up like at 5, maybe 6 in the morning. And I just had ideas coming into my head. I mean, just flooding me. And so I grabbed a pen and paper and I just started writing. And I wrote for like 4 hours. And I couldn't remember what I wrote. I had to go back and reread it. And a lot of it didn't make sense because I was writing so fast.
Mm-hmm.
But I finally got through it. And I went a couple of days later, went and showed it to my friend who's a therapist. And she said, wow, there's your program. You're 60% done. Now finish it. I mean, I couldn't keep up with it. Well, it took me about 6 months to finish it. So I know that was truly inspired.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't just go and lecture. This is kind of weird to me because what I do is I ask a lot of questions because I've discovered that people already know the answers. They just don't want to reach inside and find them sometimes because that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's painful.
And it can
scary.
be painful. Yes. Yeah. And so it turned into an 8-hour course. And then the funny thing, even more funny, when I was growing up, my grandfather was a photojournalist, and I grew up in his library. Mm-hmm. And he actually was a history writer. He actually wrote a couple of books for the Colorado Cattlemen's Association and things like that. And so I remember him sitting there on his Underwood typewriter, typing with one finger. I mean, but man, he could type faster with one finger than I can with all of mine. And I grew up reading books in his library. Well, I never thought of writing a book, but all of a sudden, a little bit later in my life, and I'll share a little bit more I'll share this before we get to that part. What happened was I actually sat down and started writing a book. And my class turned into a book, and I named it Bridging the Gap because I wanted to bridge the gaps that I have created in my life and the gaps that I have created between me and others, especially after traumatic events. And so communication is so important. But as we continue on, there's so many weird things that happen. It's just funny. I got really, really lucky. I actually went online and started doing some online dating. And one time I went out with like 9 ladies in 10 days, and I'm exhausted. I'm all or nothing.
You adapted the 31 flavors model.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to try a little bit of everything.
I did, but I was a little wiser this time. I mean, there were some really neat ladies, but I was really, really looking at the overall everything. Mm-hmm. And I was exhausted. I went, I'm done with this. Okay, this is horrible. But I met one lady that we started talking on the phone, and I hadn't met her in person, but we started talking on the phone, and we've never stopped.
Aww.
We talked one night. We started talking like 4 or 5 or 6 hours a night. And one night she says, don't you have to work tomorrow? I said, yeah. Don't you have to get up at 3:30? Yeah. Don't you think you should get some sleep? And I looked at the clock, and it was like 1 o'clock. We had been talking since. I mean, yeah. And so I got really, really lucky, but even there's weird stuff that happened. I started doing healing is not just a medical Western medicine type healing, especially from trauma. And this is one of the things I talk about is getting outside our box. We build these tiny little boxes around us. Our brain says it's to protect us. And in reality, it's holding us in. It's holding us back from experiencing so many wonderful things. Right. And so I started trying some of the outside the box things. I did EMDR before that was even a thing.
Even a thing, huh?
Yeah, it was experimental. Another one I did was, and I love it, still my favorite, is what they call Tibetan bowls or singing bowls. They create a tone and a vibration, and they put me in a trance.
They're amazing.
Yes.
So I got to be a part of that just briefly during one of my retreats that I went to. And the other thing that I really loved that was so healing was a drumming circle. Have you done one of those?
That's where I'm going.
Okay. Well, then I'm not going to spoil it because it's so like, wow. Like, it's amazing how many tools our Heavenly Father gives us for healing, you know?
These are things I don't know about. So
well, Scott, I'm going to have to take you to a drumming circle.
Well, the funny thing is, drum circle as a cop meant to me a bunch of hippies and dopers dancing around a fire in tie-dye shirts. That's what a drum circle was.
It's not that at all, though.
The shaman-led drum circles are a healing thing that are amazing. And the shaman that was leading it, I asked her to make me a drum. So I do have my own drum.
Do you?
I do.
Aww.
And I asked her to put certain symbols on it that meant things to me: the bear, the eagle, a couple of others, the moose, that was the other one. And when she finally, after a few months, came back and gave me my drum, she says, I had this ready to go, and then something just kept telling me to put this symbol here. And I ignored it. That's why it's taken so long. I ignored it for a month. And then as I was picking it up to bring it, it said, put the symbol there. And she says, so I did. I had to let it dry, so we missed the last drum circle. But here. And she gave me this beautiful drum that has a mountain with trees, with a lake and a river. Those are all things that are very special to me, with my bear, my moose, my eagle. And then she put a symbol in the middle, and then it says honor, courage, and love. Those are my key words. And I said, what's the symbol? And she says, it's a native symbol for the dragonfly. Well, the funny thing is, the gal that I was talking to on the phone, her handle online was dragonfly.
No way.
And she had a dragonfly necklace. And for her,
my gosh.
Yeah. And we talked, and if I hadn't cleaned myself out and got back to who I really am and gone to some of these type of trainings, we talked one night for a whole night about being in the moment, which is the purpose of the dragonfly, because their lifespan is so short.
So short. Mm-hmm.
So they have to be in the moment. And we talked about that, and being in the moment. The past doesn't matter. It's a great learning experience. Mm-hmm. There's no bad news. It's a learning opportunity.
It just is. Right?
Yeah, it just is. And the future depends on what we do right here, right now, in this moment. And so we have to make conscious choices minute by minute. And that's what that means to me. And she has helped me in that regard so much, because, that's another story I'll share in a minute. Anyway, that was 7 years ago, and we are still together to this day. She's my wife now. And my kids, she is such a loving and beautiful lady. My kids actually call her mom. Their mom passed away, but she is so gracious and loving. So I got lucky. Bottom of the ninth, 2 strikes, and I hit a home run. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to that one.
Glen, I had this question pop up, and it just keeps lingering in the back of my head. So I have to ask you, during this whole experience of you starting on your healing journey and everything like that, how, or did you, I guess could be even think, were you able to communicate with Heavenly Father? I know you had mentioned nature and stuff. Was that kind of your way of communicating with him? And were you able to use words, or was it more of did you just trust that he knew your heart?
All of the above. Yeah. I definitely made sure to tell him thank you.
Oh,
And I verbally tell him thank you for the things that there's no way that I could come up with some of this stuff on my own.
yeah.
I knew I'm not stupid, but just the way it happened, I know. The way it turned into a book, I know. I'm looking at the book maybe made into a movie. I have a producer that just took it, and
Awesome.
so we'll see what happens. But it's at there to help others and to help me, because that's one of the things that I discovered was writing it down was so cathartic when I shared the experiences. And that's the one thing about my relationship now. My wife and I have zero secrets.
I
In
love
fact, she
that.
can look at me in the face and know what I'm thinking. That's how I don't.
Oh.
And I like it that way.
Mhm.
Sometimes it frees me, but yeah, I got really lucky. And so, yes, nature gets me so much closer to God.
Mhm.
Do I talk to him? Absolutely, I do. Sometimes I just think.
Yep.
But there are times where I get down and I speak out loud and I just let it go. And
I love that.
I get to be open, and he knows what, I've been guided. I don't know why. I don't know yet, but I'm still, even though I'm retired, and I feel like I made a difference in a lot of people's lives in my career, I'm not done making a difference yet. And I have actually kind of ended up being sort of on the forefront, and I'm kind of an expert on trauma now, and I don't know how the heck that happened.
Mhm.
But that's where I'm at now. So that's why I now travel. I talk to police departments. I talk to fire departments. I talk to actually anybody, because what I discovered during COVID, everybody's got trauma.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's the processes can all be worked through very similarly. And I know that's what I teach in my class. I talk about some ways to start working through things. And, you always run into some people that don't want to learn yet.
Mhm.
But another thing, I had one class that I was teaching at the police academy, 30 people in it. And this guy was sitting in the back with his arms folded. And that's not a good sign.
Mhm.
And I said, "What do you think?" He goes, "I don't tell my family anything." I said, "Why not? They don't need to know." Interesting. Well, would you agree with me that people are creatures of habit? And he says, "Yes, they are." So you're not sharing with your family 60 to 70% of your waking life, and that's without overtime and without extra duties. 60 to 70% of your waking life you're not sharing. He goes, "Nope, they don't need to know that stuff." I said, "You're a creature of habit. What else aren't you sharing?" And he kind of sat back, went, "They don't need to know." Funny thing is, though, his sergeant was sitting next to him. He leaned forward and started getting involved in the class.
Really?
So you don't always reach who you think you're going to reach.
Mm-hmm.
And the sergeant was reached and started changing, then that will branch out. And it's what I call the ripple effect. If I change myself, change a person, one person at a time, starting with me.
Yeah.
And I change me, then I affect my family and those around me. My most important communities, my family. And I've done that. And they're working through a lot of the same things. And then we reach out and ripple out to our friends and to our employees or employers, and et cetera, until we've changed the world.
Yeah. Wow. One of the things that I used to tell the youth was that Satan thrives in secrecy. The more that we hold on to our secrets, the more that we hold on to our feelings and our thoughts and even our experiences, right? The more juice that we're giving Satan to be able to really flood us with doubt and insecurity and anger and hatred and sin and all of those things that take us away from who it is that we've always been, right? Like who it is that we were created to be in the pre-existence. And so in my family, my husband, he actually had PTSD for a while too. He contracted over in Afghanistan, And so he's a phone guy, he did internet and stuff like that. Like he wasn't a military guy. But he went over there. The money was great. Our marriage was not. And when he came home, that was one of the things that we struggled with was he didn't feel that I needed to know anything. Part of it was he thought he was protecting me from knowing about, these suicide bombers that would try to infiltrate their forts and, getting bombed outside of the walls. And just the fact that he, things like he would have to sit in the middle of like everybody else had a gun, but because he wasn't military, he wasn't allowed to carry his own gun. So that feeling of, especially for my husband, he's always the alpha, he's always the one, like he's been shooting since he was a kid. He knows how to handle weapons, but that feeling of like, I have no way to protect myself. I have to let all of these little 20-year-old military men protect me. That did a lot of damage to him. And when he came home, he was a very different person. Yeah. And it was funny because as you're telling your story, there's so many similarities to my own story. I was diagnosed with leukemia. I technically still have it. It's just in remission right now. And so I was diagnosed around the same time that my husband came home with PTSD. Wow. And it was so hard having kids. I could see how your wife wouldn't want to get out of bed because I didn't want to. Yeah. And it was weird because at the same time when I was diagnosed, I had this experience where I just wanted to live. Like I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything I could, but I felt awful. So I know I wasn't a nice person. I was definitely not an easy person to live with. And then with my husband not knowing that he had PTSD and me not knowing, I just thought he was a big jerk. And it's so hard on relationships. And it's because neither of us were communicating with the other person. We weren't opening up. We weren't sharing. And I think that part of that openness of communication definitely comes back to you do need to start being honest with yourself. But when you include Heavenly Father in those conversations, he can help pull the truth out, and he can show you little ways. Like in your case, he can show you, hey, look, Glenn, nature is going to be a place where you feel my love and where you find yourself. Right. And hey, look, a drumming circle may be weird for Scott. He might not like it. But Glenn and Alicia, here you go. Bang away. Right.
Go get your drum on.
I know. So our Heavenly Father knows us so well. And when we just open up that line of communication with him, and then we're willing to open it up with our friends and our families and our community, it really is so healing for the world. Really, really is.
You said something that just struck me, and I'll share an example in my life for a minute here. We all are so programmed to be in our heads. And the head is a great computer, but we cannot let it run our life because all it does is wall us in, and it's attempting in its own way to protect us, but it keeps us from experiencing so many things. And we got to come from the heart. Mm-hmm. And I actually had my manuscript and I pitched it to the publishers, and they wanted my full manuscript. And that was in November of, I don't remember what year now, but in November. All I had to do was submission paperwork that they requested. It was about 20 pages is it. I had it all done in December. And then I sat there in January and I thought, I don't have good enough, it's not recommendations, but endorsements. Mm-hmm. They wanted 3, I had 2. And there are people that nobody other than around me had really knew. So I thought, the mind just kept telling me, nope, it's not good enough. I'm just trying to protect me from being embarrassed and getting rejected. But, but I sat there and I held on to that for 9 months, January to November, 9 months.
Wow.
One day I woke up and I learned a trick or tool. It takes your mind 5 seconds to come up with an objection. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to go take the 20 minutes I have left to finish this paperwork. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And I went down, jumped on my laptop, finished it up. It only had 2 endorsements and they were nobody that anybody knew. And I sent it off. And that was on a Thursday. I got a call on Friday and said, okay, thank you for your submission. Here's the process. Is there a time that we can talk in person next week on a Zoom call. And I worked Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And so I said, yeah, let's do it on Wednesday. So we got on a Zoom call on Wednesday, and the guy says, okay, they review books submissions on Thursdays. So that'll be when they look at whether accept or reject your book. Here's the process, and he walked me through the whole process. It was about an hour call, and I'm going to send you a sample contract just in case they offer you one. That way you're familiar with it. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, I'll talk to you. I'll get that to you probably tomorrow or Friday. Well, Friday, I'm working out in my garage. I didn't have my phone with me. But I walked in, I had a message, and it says, congratulations, they accepted your book. I'm going to send you a real contract.
Wow.
I delayed
9 months.
9 months because I was up here, and it was telling me how it wasn't good enough, and I wasn't good enough, and it wasn't ready. And and it took a week. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was done, and I had a contract, and now I love going around doing book signings and going to conferences and all the things that I do.
Wow. When Heavenly Father wants something out there, he'll make it work.
Make it easy for him if you can.
He'll open doors. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Well, I don't have any like super cool stories about communication, but I use it a lot in my business. And I learned some really cool things from Brene Brown. Have you ever heard of her, Glenn?
Just at a conference with her in December, actually, that's where I broke my foot.
Oh, okay. You didn't kick her, did you?
No,
Don't
she
do that.
No.
Okay, that's fair.
One of the things that she taught me was about the story we tell ourselves. Yeah. And that's been a huge game changer for my business and even in my personal life, because a lot of times we get stories in our heads that aren't true. And we have to, or somebody tells us their side of a story and we don't really understand what they're saying, or we interpret it the wrong way. And she taught me the idea of, when you're talking to somebody, or even when you're talking to yourself, what's the story you're actually telling yourself? And that's not true. Right. And when you have a conversation with somebody and you say that, well, the story I'm telling myself is this, and it gives that person a whole different perspective on what you're talking about. Yeah. And communication is huge.
It is. And I start with self-accountability, and then I talk about perception. Because perception is reality. We see the world the way we are.
Totally.
It's not always correct.
Yeah.
It's not always the way it really is.
Right.
And it's so, again, taking deep, hard looks at ourselves, and that's not a real pleasant sometimes. But that's the only way that we work through things and get better and become better people.
Right. I love that. I'm going to make that a quote that I put up on my wall, that we see the world the way we are. Right.
Yep.
Oh, that's so powerful. It's so, so true. Wow. Wow. Glenn, this was just I was so right. This was just such a great interview with you. I really, really appreciate you taking the time and coming on here. I gotta ask, do you have any last words that you'd like to share with everybody, or any other messages you want to make sure our audience can hear?
Yeah. Basically things that I've been talking about, and I didn't share a lot of the stories because time-wise, just don't really have that. But perception is reality. So we have to really question our perception sometimes. And again, being self-accountable is the first thing that we do. And I think even if you look in scriptures and things, it talks a lot about that. It doesn't quite call it that exceptionally, but we have to take the look at ourselves, because I can't fix you. I don't want to fix you. I can't fix anybody else. I can fix me, and I can take me to where I want to be. And by doing that, it's like Marianne Williamson had a poem shared by Nelson Mandela in his inauguration. And it talks about, don't bury your light, let your light shine brightly as children do.
My favorite quote ever. We're going to put that up on our page. I'll pull it up. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and I can't remember the whole poem without reading it, so I'm just giving you a couple of the parts that I remember, but that's basically what it says is don't bury yourself under a bushel. Let your light shine, and as you lead the way with your light, it gives others permission to do the same. And so we get and that's kind of like my ripple effect, basically. But that is a very important poem. In fact, I share that in my class, and it just has such meaning to me. So don't be afraid to get outside of the box. You'll be amazed at what's out there. And don't be afraid to go for it, whatever it may be.
I love that.
I think what you said earlier too is important too. Don't hesitate to find somebody to help you.
Yeah.
Or to get help, right?
Especially if you have trauma, find somebody to talk to. Whether it be your spouse, whether it be a coworker, whether it be a therapist, whatever, and get it out before it kills you. Because
absolutely,
like in law enforcement, the suicide rate is horrendously high. And the divorce rate is horrendously high. And that's my purpose now, is just go around and help people get through things and reduce divorce, reduce suicide, and reduce the effects of PTSD.
I love that.
And that could be not just in law enforcement, but anybody. In fact, I even am working on getting an agent so I can go do some keynote speaks.
That would be so wonderful.
It all goes into leadership too, because leadership is dramatic.
Oh, awesome. So let me ask you, if someone is interested in getting your book or hiring you to come and to speak to like their police department or fire department, or just contacting you in general, or supporting you in you know, your mission here, how would they go about doing that?
Well, a couple ways. First way is probably on my website, which is gdub.author.com. That's short for GW, so gdubauthor.com. And then you can get my book at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. There's several other places that I don't remember. Remember Bridging the Gap, that is me now. I'm bridging the gap with myself and other people as I work my way through. So that's probably the best way, or contact Scott and Alicia and they'll get hold of me.
There you go.
Yeah,
but if you guys contact us, then you have to be a guest too. So no, I'm just joking.
We'll put your links in the content section of the post for sure.
Okay.
Awesome.
And I'll email you back off my website.
Okay. Sounds good. That sounds fabulous. Well, I pulled that quote up. I have to share it. I think it would just be a great way to finish this episode. It is seriously one of my favorite quotes. It made me so excited when you said it. So again, it's by Marianne Williamson. And she says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people will feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And when we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others." Isn't that? Oh man, that's the one.
Yeah, I love that
just
quote.
So great. And I think that perfectly wraps up just your journey, Glenn, and the change that you've been able to make in yourself and in your own life, and the change that you're really working towards making in other people's lives. And I commend you for that. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. That's all I can say is thank you.
It's been awesome having you on, Glenn. We really appreciate you. And
Thanks,
we wish
Scott.
you all the best in your journey.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
My pleasure. And it's just a lot of fun now. So.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for coming on and listening to Glen's story. And like I said, we'll put where you can get his book and follow him in the post. And also, if you have a desire to share your story, you're welcome to come on our show like Glen did. Just go to latterdaylights.com and fill out the content portion, and we will get in touch.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And if you guys could just do us a huge favor, this message especially is needed so much in our world today. If you guys wouldn't mind, pulling out that little button, that little share button, and making sure you press it, do your 5-minute missionary work for the day, right? Or 5-second missionary work. What did we call it? I can't remember, Scott. 5-second missionary work for the day. Share this episode with your friends and your family. Get the message out there so that other people can start healing, and so that you can really be that person that helps to spread the light. We would greatly appreciate it. And I know that for me personally, whenever I share good, I feel good. So we're going to encourage you guys to be sure to like, share, comment, get this episode out there and help other people to be able to get in contact with Glen or to be able to pick up his book so that they can start healing as well. With that, we thank you guys, all of our listeners, for tuning in to another episode of Latter-day Lights. Until next week, hope you guys have a great one.
Take care.